There's a place in America where compasses spin backward, where people vanish mid-step into thin air, and where the forest itself seems to be watching you. A place law enforcement won't patrol after dark. A place the native tribes abandoned centuries ago, whispering one word as they left: cursed. They call it the Bridgewater Triangle. And tonight, you're going to learn why some doors should never be opened. Southeastern Massachusetts. Picture-perfect New England towns. White picket fences. Church steeples piercing autumn skies. But carved into this landscape lies a 200-square-mile zone of absolute terror. The Bridgewater Triangle, bounded by the towns of Abington, Rehoboth, and Freetown. This isn't some urban legend whispered around campfires. This is documented, investigated, and unexplained. The Triangle has been the site of more paranormal activity than anywhere else on the eastern seaboard. UFO encounters, cryptid sightings, ritual murders, disappearances that defy every law of physics and reason. For over 3 centuries, something has been happening here. Something that turns skeptics into believers, and believers into victims. At the heart of it all sits the Hockomock Swamp. 16,000 acres of black water and rotting vegetation. The Wampanoag people who once lived here called it the place where spirits dwell. They wouldn't hunt there, wouldn't fish there, wouldn't even speak its name after sunset. Now we know why. It starts with the fog. Everyone who's been to Hockomock says the same thing. The fog there doesn't move like normal fog. It crawls, reaches. One moment you're on a trail in broad daylight. The next, you're surrounded by a wall of gray so thick you can't see your own hands. And that's when you hear them, the whispers. Dozens of witnesses have reported voices in that swamp. Not animal sounds, not wind through the reeds. Voices, speaking in a language that predates English, that predates the colonists, that might predate human civilization itself. Some say the voices call your name. Others say they mimic the people you love, luring you deeper into the mire where the mud swallows you whole. In 1978, a state police officer named Thomas Downey was searching for a missing hiker near the swamp's western edge. His report is still in the files, still sealed, but copies leaked, and what they contain is bone-chilling. Officer Downey wrote that he heard a child crying in the fog. He followed the sound for 20 minutes, his flashlight cutting through the gray, until he realized something impossible. The crying was leading him in a perfect circle. He was back where he started. When he looked down, he saw his own footprints in the mud. But there was a second set of prints beside them. Small, barefoot, child-sized. He ran. He won't talk about it. Not even now, 47 years later. But the whispers are just the beginning. The Wampanoag elders speak of the Pukwudgies. 2-foot-tall creatures with gray skin, massive ears, and fingers that end in claws. They can appear and disappear at will. They can shapeshift, and they hate humans with a passion that borders on obsession. Legend says the Pukwudgies were once friendly to the tribe, helpful spirits who guided hunters and healed the sick. But something changed. Some betrayal lost to time. Now they hunt us instead. They lure travelers off cliffs. They push people into quicksand. They mimic voices to draw victims into the deep woods where no one can hear the screaming. Folklore? Maybe. But in 2001, a hiker named Margaret Keene was walking the trails near Profile Rock when she saw what she described as a child in the distance. She called out. The figure turned. She said its face was wrong. Too long, too pale, eyes too far apart. She blinked, and it was gone. She turned to leave and found her backpack had been moved 30 feet away. She hadn't heard a sound. 3 days later, another hiker found strange markings carved into trees along that same trail. Symbols that matched nothing in any known language. When researchers tried to photograph them, every camera malfunctioned. Every single one. The Pukwudgies are still here, still watching. But if the triangle were only haunted by ancient spirits, it might be easier to understand. It's what started happening in the 1960s that turned this from folklore into a full-blown government concern. The UFOs. On March 23, 1966, dozens of residents in Bridgewater and surrounding towns reported a massive triangular craft hovering over the swamp. Not a plane, not a helicopter. Silent, massive, glowing with a sickly green light that lit up the night sky. Police switchboards were flooded. Officers were dispatched. And they saw it, too. Officer Alan Harrington, now deceased, gave an interview in 1989. He said the craft hung motionless for 17 minutes before shooting straight up into the sky, at a speed that should have created a sonic boom. There was no sound. It just vanished. Over the next 2 decades, the Triangle became one of the most active UFO hotspots in North America. Metallic spheres, lights that followed cars down empty roads, objects that emerged from the swamp itself, dripping with black water before ascending into the clouds. In 1976, 2 teenage boys were driving near Lake Nipponicket when their car engine died. The radio went to static. They looked up and saw a disc-shaped object, maybe 50 feet above them, so close they could see panels on its underside. Then a beam of white light hit their windshield. Both boys said they felt paralyzed, frozen. When the light retracted, the craft was gone. Their engine restarted on its own. 3 hours had passed. They have no memory of what happened in that time. The military knew. Declassified documents from the 1970s show that Hanscom Air Force Base sent multiple teams to investigate sightings in the Triangle. The reports exist, but the conclusions still classified. What were they hiding? If you venture into the Freetown State Forest after dark, you might stumble upon a clearing that locals call the altar. Blackened stones, arranged in a circle, animal bones piled in the center. Sometimes the bones are fresh. The Triangle has a history soaked in blood, cult activity, ritual killings. In 1998, police discovered the mutilated remains of several calves in the forest. Their organs had been removed with surgical precision. No tracks, no evidence, just death arranged like an offering. But the cattle weren't the worst of it. There have been human remains too. In 2004, a dog walker found a shallow grave containing bones that forensic analysis dated back to the 1980s. The victim's identity was never confirmed. The case went cold. But here's the disturbing part. The bones showed signs of ritualistic markings, symbols carved post-mortem. Local paranormal investigators believe the forest has become a beacon for dark practices. Some say the land itself is cursed, and those who perform rituals here are trying to harness that curse. Others believe something in the triangle demands sacrifice, that it always has. The police patrols that used to cover the forest at night, they stopped. Budget cuts, they said. But the officers who work those shifts tell a different story. They talk about seeing figures in robes moving through the trees, about finding circles of candles still burning in the rain, about the feeling that they were being hunted. One former ranger, who asked to remain anonymous, told me this: "The forest doesn't want us there. You can feel it. Like a weight on your chest. Like every shadow is leaning toward you." I quit because I started hearing my daughter's voice calling me from the woods. My daughter was at home, 2 towns away. That place is evil. Then there's the phantom hitchhiker of Route 44, the most haunted road in Massachusetts. The story goes back decades, but it always follows the same pattern. A young woman in a white dress, standing on the shoulder of the road, thumb out. Drivers who pick her up say she's polite, quiet. She asks to be taken to a specific address in Rehoboth. But before they arrive, she vanishes, mid-sentence, mid-breath, gone. Some drivers have turned around to find the back seat empty. Others say they felt a cold hand on their shoulder, and when they looked in the rearview mirror, there was no one there. One man in 2003 claimed he gave her a ride, and she told him her name, Lydia. She said she was going home from a dance. When he asked what year, she said 1952. He pulled over, and she was gone. He drove to the address she'd given him. The house was abandoned. The mailbox, faded and falling apart, still read, Lydia Karen. Lydia Karen died in a car accident on Route 44 in 1952. She was 17. She's still trying to get home. But perhaps the most disturbing reports come from those who are trained to stay calm under pressure. Police officers, first responders, people who don't scare easily. In 1994, 2 Massachusetts state troopers were investigating a reported abandoned vehicle near the swamp. When they arrived, the car was empty. Keys in the ignition, headlights still on. No sign of the driver. They radioed for backup and began searching the perimeter. Both officers reported hearing footsteps circling them in the dark. Footsteps that matched their pace exactly. When they stopped, the footsteps stopped. When they moved, the footsteps moved. They drew their weapons, called out warnings. Nothing. Just footsteps and breathing. Backup arrived 8 minutes later. The 2 officers were standing back to back in the middle of the road, flashlights scanning the darkness. They said they'd been followed for over 20 minutes. But here's the thing. Their body cameras were recording the entire time. The footage shows them walking, shows them stopping, shows their flashlight beams cutting through the trees. But there are no footsteps on the audio. No breathing, just silence. They heard it, but nothing was there. So what is the Bridgewater Triangle? Is it cursed land, stained by centuries of bloodshed and suffering? Is it a thin place where the barrier between worlds wears thin, letting things through that were never meant to cross? Or is it something worse, a place that's alive, conscious, feeding on fear and death and the slow unraveling of human sanity? The skeptics will tell you it's coincidence, swamp gas, mass hysteria. But those explanations fall apart when you look at the evidence. The reports span centuries. The witnesses include police, pilots, scientists, ordinary people with nothing to gain and everything to lose by speaking out. Something is happening in the Bridgewater Triangle. Something that defies logic, that mocks our understanding of reality. And it's not stopping. Just last year, 3 college students went camping in Freetown State Forest. They posted updates on social media, laughing, joking about the spooky woods. On their second night, the posts stopped. Search teams found their campsite 3 days later. Tents still standing, food untouched, personal belongings left behind. But the students, gone. Their phones were never found. No footprints leading away from the site. No signs of struggle. Just 3 people erased from existence in the span of a single night. The search was called off after 2 weeks. Officially, it remains an open missing persons case. Unofficially, the lead investigator told a local reporter, off the record, "We're not going back in there. Whatever took them can keep them." The Bridgewater Triangle is still there, still waiting. You can drive through it right now if you want. The roads are open. The trails are marked. But the people who live there will tell you the same thing the Wampanoag knew 300 years ago. Some places are meant to be left alone. So if you ever find yourself on Route 44 after dark, and you see a woman in white on the side of the road, don't stop. If you hear a child crying in the fog, don't follow. And if you feel like something is watching you from the trees, trust that instinct. Because in the Bridgewater Triangle, the things that watch you don't just observe. They wait. And when you finally let your guard down, when you convince yourself it's all just stories, that's when they step out of the shadows. That's when they take you home. And if you enjoyed this story, make sure to hit that like button. Share this video with a friend who loves creepy stories. And don't forget to subscribe and press the bell icon, because this is just the beginning. The next story might be darker, and you won't want to miss it.